Adaptation is a tricky business. You can change just a little and get it completely wrong, or you can change a whole lot and still somehow get it exactly right. It simply depends on how faithful every choice is to the story's original intent. Childhood's End falls somewhere in the middle. Syfy's 3-part miniseries maintains most of the basic structure of Clarke's original story, with surprisingly few alterations. The period has been updated to the present day, some additional backstory has been given to the characters, and similar to what Philip de Guerre planned back in the 70s, major players like Stormgren and Rodericks are made central figures from beginning to end. Little has been dropped, quite a few things have actually been added. There's a greater focus on religious backlash, which becomes a main subplot, and Stormgren has a much larger arc involving memories of his dead wife and a mysterious illness threatening his life, which of course turns out to have something to do with the Overlord Supervisor of Earth, Corellin. As big as some of these additions are, none of it breaks the overall bones of the story. Events play out in much the same way as the book, and everything builds to the same devastating climax. It appears a pretty faithful rendering of Clarke's intentions, but emotionally, something's missing. Even though there's more going on in the plot, it feels less interesting. And even with the same conclusion, it doesn't hit with the same impact as Clarke's novel. Why is that? I think I've pinpointed a few reasons. It wasn't just the story that made Clarke's book so great. An enormous part of its effect was created by the characters and their relationships, something that doesn't immediately register in the presence of a story this grand. Clarke's spectacular imagery was given a relatable human dimension by the fact that it was imagined through the eyes of very specific people. Anything we feel when we read it, awe, terror, understanding, we feel because we're empathizing with the characters. It's subtle, but Syfy's adaptation misses a few vital details about these characters. First, there's Stormgren, rewritten here to be much younger, and instead of a diplomat, he's a humble, small-town farmer. The intent is to make him more average and relatable. Instead, it just makes him more anonymous. What made Stormgren so interesting in the book was his advancing age, the weariness and perspective that came with it, the growing disillusionment with his job. Losing this not only means losing his personality, it means losing the very qualities that allow him to understand the position of the Overlord Corellin. These two characters develop an engaging affection for one another as the story progresses, and the reason they relate to each other is because, deep down, in spite of their obvious differences, they're really very similar. The miniseries doesn't capture any of the nuance of that relationship. In his performance as Corellin, Charles Dance is able to convey the required emotional notes, but it doesn't feel reciprocated. Mike Vogel does his best as Stormgren, but without an actor of comparable age and experience to match and reflect those notes, there's only so much he can do. Instead, their relationship progresses more artificially, according to the beats of plot construction. Stormgren, with his life-threatening illness, spends more time reacting to crisis than he does really getting to know Corellin. And with his constant pining for his dead wife, whatever relationship he does have to Corellin just doesn't feel as important. Then there's Rodericks. In the book, Rodericks was defined by his intrepid spirit. Feeling that mankind has lost a fundamental curiosity and resolve, the fuel of previous centuries of scientific advancement, Rodericks voluntarily chooses to turn his back on the universal comfort offered by the Overlord's rule. The thought of being the first human being to leave the solar system, the first to set foot on an alien planet, drives him to stow away on an Overlord ship. Again, the series removes this defining characteristic by having Rodericks in the show reach his decision by means of plot mechanics. He glimpses a vision of Earth's destruction and, out of some vague hope of stopping it, stows away on a ship headed back to the Overlord's home planet. What exactly he hopes to find there, I'm not sure. He's looking for a solution to a problem. but I don't really see how he expects to find one. It's hard to understand because it doesn't happen for any other reason than the plot requires it. He doesn't make the decision because of who he is or what he believes. He only seems to do it because it's necessary. Clarke created sympathy and depth for Rodericks by making him an out-of-place romantic, an adventurer stuck in a time and place where adventure was vanishing. That defined who he was and the choices he made. The show expands his backstory, making him a handicapped child growing up in a poor, crime-ridden neighborhood. The Overlord's arrival on Earth opens up a whole new life for him, but this does little to help define who he is, because the story doesn't follow through on the added material in a way that meaningfully impacts his later choices. Same as Stormgren, he comes to feel like just another function in a plot. All of this bothered me a great deal, but in truth it didn't add up to catastrophe. The show still has its moments, and even when it's at its worst, it's never really that bad. There's some good effects work on the Overlords, Charles Dance really does give a strong performance, and Clarke's story is so interesting that even in this form, it still maintains much of its interest. The sad part is, it could have been much better. With a stronger vision, a better script, a more focused, insightful hold on the story and the characters, it could have been great. I think in this instance, the miniseries format worked against it. There are too many unnecessary subplots, too much extra material that only distracts from the key ingredients. The visual impact is also lessened by the more modest budgetary level of television. As much as the medium has advanced in the last decade, it's still hard to reach the level of polish you get with movies. Most likely, this is why the show drops what is probably the best sequence in the book, describing the overwhelming sights Rodericks encounters on the Overlord's home planet. There's a visit to a sort of zoo containing alien life forms, some of which are so strange and unfamiliar, Rodericks actually feels a quasi-Lovecraftian sense of cosmic horror just looking at them. Then there's a cryptic encounter with a non-physical being called the Overmind, an experience of such intense dread it shakes Rodericks to his very core. It's the moment that finally drives home for him just how small and insignificant human beings are within the unknowable vastness of the universe. And it's when he understands that to be human is to be, in a way, limited, motivating his return to Earth. These passages would be incredibly difficult to replicate on screen. Much of their power comes through Clarke's exceptional prose. If it could be put in the hands of the right director, it has the potential to be extraordinary. The miniseries gives it a good effort, but it leaves the greatness of the book largely untouched. I believe there's still a lot that can be done with Childhood's End, and I hope to see it in another adaptation. I don't expect to see it anytime soon, but that's the nice thing about great books. They never really go away.